itself. So Artie will be joining us shortly. We'll go upstairs when the borough president gets here, but we'll give you guys a little bit of a behind-the-scenes tour at some of the parts of the Green Roof we don't always get to show during our tours. Yeah. This is our atrium to our facility. This facility reference is the 5-borough building. This is one of the hubs of NYC Parks. Many of our departments work out of this building. Sustainable facilities, my department, trades, mechanics, signs, purchasing, acquisition, engineers, architects, the list goes on. And it's really a beautiful place to work because all these teams work side by side to help these projects and many more. This, one of the over 30 systems we have here, is a walkable green roof. It's also a recreational space for the facility. So this pathway here within the grass connects two sides of the atrium. One of the systems that we actually designed in-house. There's also several other systems that we're piloting in this area and several more to come. One of the things we'll talk about later upstairs that we already have in place, so you'll use your imagination for now, is a vertical green wall. So on the brickwork around the atrium, we've imagined several different vertical systems that we might put into place. We have the model that we're going with. We already have stage up there, which you'll see in a moment. Vertical green roofs are beautiful as well. Actually, how much does your group know about green roofs coming into this?
I know quite a bit about green roofs, but why don't you assume that we don't know anything?
Exactly.
Perfect. No worries. So, a green roof, in essence, is a vegetated roof surface. It's diverting from traditional roof systems, such as black tar roof. You might have a river wash stone roof. You might have a slate roof. And it's really an amazing piece of sustainable technology. It's very simple. It may look complicated, but we've essentially added soil or some sort of growing medium to the roof surface and plants. It has numerous benefits for the urban environment. It really helps us deal with a lot of urban environmental issues that there aren't traditional solutions for. Things like the urban heat island effect. It's about 10 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than it is in upstate New York because of the excess of traffic, because of all the dark surfaces with low albedo that get hotter. So just like you don't wear dark clothes in the summer or light clothes because it reflects sunlight, dark black tar roofs get very hot. I don't know if any of you have ever been on a roof in the summer. Preposterously hot, 170 degrees Fahrenheit. Trying to get away from that using planted surfaces that actually dramatically reduces the immediate temperature as well as the overall temperature for the area. Not only that, it's helping us deal with combined sewer overflow events. CSO events are a big issue for the city. All of our plumbing from all of our buildings and all our streets are all connected, which is fine on a day like today, but if it does rain today, which we're hoping it doesn't, not only does all the water, sewage, wastewater that our buildings produce from our toilets, from our sinks, from our washing machines, from our showers, all of that's going to sewage treatment plants, but in addition, all the runoff from our streets is also going to those same plants. Almost everything in the construction environment is impermeable surfaces: metal, glass, steel, asphalt, concrete. All of these surfaces aren't picking up any rainwater, so when it rains on our buildings and our streets, those surfaces don't retain any of that rainwater. It washes off them, carries all the trash and all the oil and all the soot with it, and it goes down into a sewer drain, and it combines with all the other wastewater that our buildings produce. And when it rains, even in a very small rainstorm, it almost always overloads our sewer system, and we have what's known as a combined sewer overflow event, where we release that unclean rainwater in addition to all the sewage and water that our buildings produce into open waterways. It's a very bad environmental situation, but by creating permeable surfaces such as green roofs, we're able to fight against that. We logistically can't undo our combined sewer system. That would cost hundreds of trillions of dollars to undo every pipe in the entire city, but it's a very real option to put green roofs on our buildings. That's something that could dramatically change that situation for the city.
How much rainwater do you capture in a 5-borough?
We capture all the rainwater that hits this building. Our systems are all very different. They all have different amounts of stormwater capture, but on average they capture at least 1 inch of rain per square foot of green roofing material. Some of them, as I was telling the group earlier, we have a blue-green tray system that's on the high end of the rainwater capture system that captures 2 1/4 inches of rain per square foot, and the system itself is only about 4 inches deep. That's even 1 inch of rainwater storage per square foot is a dramatic amount of rainwater to hold. About 90% of our storms are underneath that. In the instance that those systems are saturated, and all the systems that hold more than 1 inch are saturated, we also have an extensive gray water system. You'll see the tanks throughout the roof. We have about 7,000 gallons of gray water storage. The footprint of this building, with the exception of perhaps a Hurricane Sandy level event, retain all the rainwater that hit it. and we reuse the water that isn't immediately used by the plants. We hold that in the gray water system temporarily, and then we re-irrigate our plants with that later on when things get hot out. We'll show you those tanks that are positioned all over the roof. It's a really amazing and very simple environmental solution that we put into play here, that we model for the agency and for the city, and we like to talk about on tours. Equipment for green roofs, for gray water systems. We'll talk about composting as well and many other pieces of sustainable technology. The real beautiful thing about all these things is they all work. They're all very accessible. They're all incredibly inexpensive pieces of technology. Very little, if any, maintenance. These are accessible things that we hope that more people adopt in their offices, in their homes, in their schools, as the city as a whole. We really think that this technology has a lot of promise, so we really put a lot of work into modeling everything there is out there and foolproofing every system that comes across our desk. My job specifically is as the Sustainability Project Development Coordinator for the agency. I get hundreds, if not thousands, of articles. We have a Google alert system set up where we have keywords for all different things, for green roofs, for alternative energy, for alternative fuel types, for all this different technology. We get articles from around the world that are published on these topics daily, and we read through them all, and if there's any technology, if there's any research that seems to have promise, we vet it here. We look over it, we test it, we build it, we collect data on it, we verify, we see if it's worthwhile, and if it is, we're happy to model it here, we're happy to show it to the public, we're happy to show it to industry professionals come to visit us here, diplomats come to visit us here, world leaders come here, students, professionals, people who know tons about green roofs, people who are hearing about green roofs for the first time. We open their eyes to this sort of technology. They learn from our successes. They also learn from our mistakes to avoid technology that may not be as good as it seems on paper. And so really, it's truly a pleasure to be able to work here and to be able to do this for the city. I'm a native New Yorker, and I'm an environmental scientist, and those two things don't always go hand in hand. New York is not always, besides what the Parks Department take care of, New York City is not always renowned for its amazing environment. But I really see that there's this amazing intersection that we can create between the urban environment and the natural environment, and I'm really doing my best to try to create that here and model those best practices.
This is like the perfect job.
Oh, I love it. It's my dream job. I come in every day excited to work here. It's a fun place. Do you guys?
Max, with your gray water system, are you also collecting sink water, or is it just the rainwater collection?
Right now, it's only, we basically diverted all the drains from the upper roof to bleed into the gray water system, but we do have some other water conservation measures in the facility. If any of you use the men's room here, and I could escort the women if they'd like to see it, we have waterless urinals, which is a very simple piece of technology. We basically diverted the flush mechanism from the urinals. There's a U-shaped trap that temporarily holds the waste until there's enough that gravity forces it through, and there's just essentially an oil cap on top of that so it doesn't smell, so it doesn't bother people in the restroom. If you ever, in elementary school, you might make an experiment where you have a jar and you fill liquid with different gravities. You might have olive oil and soap and water, and they all seem to level out. Yeah. It works on the same principle, that the waste in there is heavier than the oil, so the oil caps it and makes sure that it doesn't smell. And it uses no water, which it sounds like a pretty simple and silly piece of technology, but in reality, one of those urinals, and we have several of them here, we have 2 of them here, and we have several throughout the agency. The urinal in this facility or a toilet is expected to be flushed 1 million times, granted the amount of staff in this building. We have over 300 permanent staff and many more rolling staff, plus ongoing visitors. In a year, each toilet gets about 1 million flushes, 1.6 gallons per flush. That's 1.6 million gallons that each of those urinals is saving. Very, very inexpensive retrofit. We use low-flow toilets, we use low-flow sinks. We're doing a major retrofit for the entire agency, replacing all of our lights with high-efficiency LEDs. Sustainability is a very, very broad topic, and I'm only one part of the sustainability team. We're doing massive amounts of work to make sure our boilers are efficient, to make sure our lights are efficient, to make sure our water use is efficient, to make sure every angle of the agency is as sustainable as possible, both in our equipment and our practices. You'll see that with the composting, which I go into a bit more in depth upstairs, but I'm happy to talk about now. We have some of our smaller composting systems here. Yeah. Composting is also a really great thing. It's very simple. The equipment costs essentially nothing. It's adding a couple more trash cans to your facility. Maintenance is very, very low, but not only is it diverting waste from your waste stream, which cuts in carbon emissions because you have less packers on the road, it cuts in your hauling fees. It It also cuts on unnecessary use of landfills. It also turns your organic waste stream from your facility, which doesn't need to be raised, all your food scraps, all of maybe your lawn clippings, all of the organic debris that you may collect from the field, which Parks, for example, has a lot of. The Parks Department controls about 50% of the city by area in terms of its parks. We have a lot of parkland out there, so that's a lot of mowing lawns, that's a lot of trimming trees, that's a lot of leaf litter. We collect that all, and we can use that for a higher purpose. Rather than throwing it out, we can turn it to compost, and that compost saves on us having to buy nutrients for our plants, and also saves us in a number of other ways, having to pay to remove that trash, having to waste staff labor to clean up that trash, having to waste the carbon emissions to haul that trash. This is one of the systems. This is one of my favorites. This is vermicomposting, which is a bit more efficient than standard composting. This is worm-based composting.
And Roosevelt Island just started a compost food scrap along with the New York City Compost and Big Reuse under the Department of Sanitation.
Marvelous.
So since November we have 14,000 pounds that we've collected.
Wow.
And the compost has come right back to the schools and the gardens.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Great to hear.
Yeah,
That program's been going smooth so far?
very smoothly.
You're gonna grab a handful and bring
It's
it
right
here.
next to our farmers market every Saturday, so people can just go to the shopping and drop off their food scraps.
That's full circle right there.
It is.
Vermicomposting, very simple. The worms are doing most of the work. And what we have left over here, although it looks like soil, this is actually technically known as worm castings. This is their waste. These worms eat their body weight a day. We started with about 3 pounds of worms. I'd say there are about 7 here now because they're constantly reproducing. And all of this soil-looking material is incredibly nutrient-rich stuff. We're able to use that on our farm beds. And we got this just by feeding this system waste. You can't see, they've been doing a really good job, so you can't see too much of it now, but there's a couple of food scraps in here. This looks like the leftovers of an apple. Saw an avocado pit in there.
Wait,
Perhaps-
they'll eat through the avocado
This
pit?
is all that's left of a cantaloupe. That outer skin. They're amazing. Very, very efficient. Very, very simple. We put the food in, we take the worm castings out. That's all the maintenance required.
Christine was just asking, will they eat the avocado pit?
Eventually, those things,
Takes some time.
The
some
tougher
things go
ones?
slower.
Yeah.
So different things will go through the composting system at different speeds. I'll show you our large tumbling units, which are a bit more of a familiar composting system, but some things like shells of nuts, avocado pits, a couple of things are notorious to stay in the system for a while, eggshells, but they will eventually compost. Not only do we really try to exercise and stage every type of green roof system out there, but we also try to model all different types of composting variants as well. So we have vermicomposting, we have your traditional 3-bin system, where you have your fresh food scraps, then your curing scraps, and then your finished compost. We have rotating bins, which I'll show you upstairs. We have compost tea, which is essentially what it sounds like. You take your finished compost and you put it in a permeable cloth, a cheesecloth, a sock, a stocking, and you run air through that, or in water, and it brews, much like a tea bag in a cup of hot water, and that creates liquid compost, which is really useful for beds that maybe are made out of a more solid growing medium that you can't dig through. We have a bokashi system, which is meat and dairy and fatty food composting. It's a pre-composting stage.
So you get the bones in there too?
Yeah,
Huh. How
It-
long does it take them to process the bones?
it's about a month before you put it into your actual composting system. So tack on a month to whatever your normal composting normally takes. So all in all, maybe 3 to 4 months. Because when you're dealing with things like that, if you're putting meat into your composting system, it may attract different decomposters that you're not so fond of. It might attract more flies than you want. It might make more of a smell than you'd like. But if you put it, it's kind of like a pickling system. You basically brine the meat and the bones and the fat. You break it down with, it's essentially a pickling brine. It breaks down the more complex molecular structures. It gives it a smell that's actually not as attractive to the pests that you might not want in your composting system.
Oh, interesting.
It's useful. It's a little bit more of an experimental model, but it's been used quite frequently. We don't get too much meat or dairy into
Yeah.
our compost, so it's not a focal point of our compost system, but it's something that we've modeled to show that it does work.
On Roosevelt Island, we're not allowed to use meat, dairy, or bones, but all food scraps, coffee, eggshells, and pasta, bread, and they let us put in the avocado pits and
Very nice.
the big papaya pits.
Very, very
and
good.
mango pits.
the wackiest compost system we had, which we vetted, and it surprisingly worked, was a styrofoam composting system.
Well, styrofoam's not so friendly for the environment.
We found something that was able to eat it and produced worm castings.
What?
I know. It was a mealworm composting system. So the mealworms that you might get at the pet store, very similar to this, except instead of these are red wigglers,
Yeah.
these are a different type of worm, and we put them in with nothing but styrofoam, packaging styrofoam that we got from a shipment. This was one of my intern's experiments. They set it up, and because we were getting a couple articles, every so often we got an article that said someone tried it at this lab, figured out how to compost styrofoam, and we're like, well, the cost of trying this experiment was about $10. Why don't we verify if this is true? And surprisingly enough, it worked. It created worm castings, very similar to these worm castings. The problem being was the efficiency of the projects. These are about 1-to-1. They eat their body weight a day. These mealworms were working at about 1% efficiency of the red wigglers. So 100 mealworms eat about a pill-sized amount of styrofoam a day. It was very, very slow. There wasn't a high turnover rate, so maybe you could scale that up and make a gigantic mealworm composting system, but it's questionable if that can be applied in the real world.
Right.
Artie!
Hey, how you doing?
Oh,
Hi.